My name is Paige Garwood, and this is the defense of my thesis. Well, actually, this is coffee. This video is the defense of my thesis. I'm setting out to answer a question. The question being, does homeschool have a place in the discussion? Any discussion concerning education? Is homeschooling a valid expression within the educational landscape? On the outset, this sounds like a pretty simplistic question. And frankly, I was looking for something deeper to talk about. But this thesis has its basis in several discussions I've had over this last year, in which educational reform was being discussed amongst teachers and some academics. And when I would try to interject the homeschooler's point of view, because I'm a teacher in the homeschool community, I would be dismissed, and it was moderately insulting, and I don't like being marginalized. So I started off this research with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. Homeschooling's good, public schooling is evil. I didn't say it like that in the thesis, and I really don't think that, but again, I was mildly insulted, and that's where this thing started. So let me give voice, or see if it's possible that I can actually give voice to a logical and reasoned reason why homeschoolers deserve a place in the discussion concerning education. One thing I wanted to do was to avoid attacking this issue of homeschool and public school the way I'm used to seeing it attacked. Homeschool advocates tout the incredibly high scores that our students are scoring, and how much better our educational model is because our kids are scoring much higher scores, and the public school people coming back and saying, yes, but your kids aren't socialized, or you're cheating, those are mommy grades, and there's no real scientific basis for the test scores that you're touting, and it goes back and forth, and homeschool advocates get studies done, guess what, by homeschool advocates, and public school people get studies done by, guess what, public school advocates, and of course their studies are going to show, if you're a public schooler, that public school is better for this reason or that reason. And of course the homeschooler studies are going to show the homeschool studies are good for this reason or that reason. I want to get past that. I would love to get to the point where representatives from public school, homeschool, private school, academics, we could all sit down at the table, have a cup of coffee, and talk with each other and discover what is working. You can't deny, and I'll get to this in a minute, you can't deny the fact that homeschooling is working. I would like to be able to sit down in a discussion and have a public school academic ask me, why is what you do working? What elements are in homeschooling that allows your students to score this well? Or a homeschooling advocate sit down with a public school and says, you know, you do this really well. How do you get to that point? What is it that you're doing? What is it that's involved in what you do that makes this thing that you're doing so well? It would be great if all three of these disciplines, public, private, and homeschool, could sit down and discuss what's right about what we do, and maybe come up with a model that would embrace all three. But we can't get there until we get to the point where everybody admits that the homeschooling advocate has a seat at the table, that the homeschooling teacher has a seat at the table when the education is being discussed. So that's where we're going to go. That's where I'm going to take this. When I was looking for a platform I could use to explain from a different angle why I believe homeschooling belongs in the discussion of education, I didn't exactly know what that was going to be until I started doing my research, and I started seeing some elements of free market and central market coming into play here. When I was doing my studying, I realized that homeschooling has been from the very beginning of this nation. From the very beginning of the first colonists that came over, homeschooling was pretty much the de facto method of schooling children. It wasn't until the post-Civil War that the concept of a public school they called it common school. The concept of a public school began, and it began in Massachusetts, and there was a reasoning for it. And the reasoning is that they were moving from an agricultural-based society to an industrial-based, and they needed a system of training that would raise up a citizenry that would be responsible and able to work in the new version of society that was coming along, the industrialized age. And they developed a common school. Massachusetts appointed the very first school superintendent, and he was tasked with coming up with a common core of instruction and develop a system of training teachers so that the school system would have expertly trained teachers, and they would be centered around a common theme. And this common theme was educate our children so they can work in an industrial society. You gotta hand the props to the public school education system, because they did a great job in so many respects. Think about what happened during World War I and World War II, when we had to turn to our factories and sometimes turn our factories around, and we became an industrial juggernaut because we had this huge pool of people in the United States that could work in factories. That's not a bad thing. It worked. It was amazing. But in the process of developing this public school system, there were layers of bureaucracy that were added. You had a school superintendent, and then there were layers between him and the teachers that were put in. And then shortly thereafter, towards World War I, World War II, the federal government started getting involved. So by the time we got to the end of World War II and into the 60s, there were layers of bureaucracy from the local community all the way to the federal government involved in these common schools. Now, one of the things that resulted from this development of the common school, or what we call the public schools, was the fact that the philosophy behind it was every child needs to be in school. And as a result, compulsory attendance laws were passed, state to state to state to state. And as compulsory attendance laws were passed, homeschooling was moved further and further and further back, to the point where by the 1980, homeschooling was illegal in 30 states of the Union. It wasn't until 1993 that homeschoolers won the right to educate their children at home, if that's what they wanted, in all 50 states of the Union. So the public school system used legislation, and they used the Supreme Court to pass these laws and to enact these laws that forced compulsory attendance upon the public. Now, the thing that occurred to me as that whole evolution of public schools happening is that as the compulsory attendance laws were passed, the educational marketplace, if you want to look at it as a marketplace, went from being a free marketplace where people had choices to what's called a centralized marketplace. You have choices, but only the choices that are allowed to you by central governing authority, in this case, the state or the federal government. You could go to a private school or the public schools. That was it. And within the public schools, there was movement towards choice. Eventually there came out things like charter schools and magnet schools, things of this nature, and laws were passed that told parents, well, if you didn't like this school that your child was at, you could take them to another district school. So there was limited choice, but that choice was limited by the government. Now, there's advantages to that, and there's disadvantages. The primary disadvantage is the element of choice really is not there. What if the parent didn't want to send their child to a public school and could not afford the private school? Not many people could afford the private school. What if they wanted to educate their child themselves? That was not a choice. So that's why the educational system in the early 20th century, I compared it to a central market. There's a few choices governed by the government. Now, enter the homeschool. By 1993, as I mentioned before, homeschooling was finally legal in all 50 states of the Union. Compulsory attendance laws were overturned. The homeschool movement used the courts. It went all the way to the Supreme Court on a couple occasions, and they used state legislatures to pass laws. And by 1993, any parent anywhere in the United States could homeschool their child. Now, we have something that resembles much more closely a free market than a central market. The public school system has gone from being the marketplace to being another player in a free market. Now granted, they had a huge market share. Over 90% of the nation's school-age children attended public school. But now the choice was there, and the marketplace was opened up to those who would bring another form of education, and that was the homeschoolers. Well, between 1993 and now, we've gone from 50 to 60,000 children being homeschooled to, one estimate is as high as 3.1 million students now being homeschooled in America. We've gone to the point where homeschoolers now comprise close to 4% of the total school-age children in America. So there's one element of this market that bears examination. In a free market, if enough people buy a product, that product is a valid place in that market. There's a lot of people buying into the homeschooling arena. There's a lot of people buying into the homeschooling model. It just on that basis alone, it deserves a place at the table whenever a discussion of education comes up. But I didn't stop there. In a marketplace, in a free market, if I was a widget builder and I built big red widgets, almost anybody who had a widget bought a widget from me. And you entered the marketplace and you sold a bigger blue widget. All of a sudden, people started looking at your bigger blue widget. Now, I have a choice. I can do nothing and let you continue to take market share away from me. I can fold up my tent and go home and just quit. Or I can respond by competing with you. That's the beauty of the free market. So I would compete. I decide to stay in the market and compete. I'm going to make a bigger blue widget. And you respond by adding to your widget wheels. Pretty soon I respond by putting wheels on my widgets. You can see how it works. The competition goes back and forth. And the winner is the public, the consumer. Because now they come to the market. And before, all they used to be able to buy was my widget. Now they can get blue widgets, red widgets, various size widgets, widgets with wheels. Maybe widgets with radios. All of a sudden the market is blown wide open and anybody selling any kind of widget can bring their widget in for sale, and now the public can buy what they want. As a result of competition, I'm going to drop my prices so I attract more people. That's the free market. Well, that's what's happened in the educational marketplace with homeschool. First of all, homeschool becomes legal in 1993 in all the states of the Union. And it's growing by some estimates 15 to 20% a year. And as it grows and continues to grow, continues to get market share, the public school system has a choice. It can do nothing, just dismiss it, it's irrelevant, it'll go away. Or they can fold up their tents and go away. Well, they're not going to do that. I mean, they're subsidized by the federal and state government. The public schools aren't going to shut down and go away. Or they can choose to compete. But why would they want to compete? Only if this new product is taking something away from them. And this something that's being taken away from the public schools are students, and attached to each student are dollars. So another test of the free market is any product that is a legitimate product in the free marketplace induces competition and change. Competition breeds change. Let's take a look at two cases. I talk about Maricopa County in Arizona. The school district in Maricopa County began to notice that it had lost a significant amount of students to the homeschool world. And the superintendent did something really, really interesting. To counter what the homeschooler market was doing, taking away students, therefore taking away funding, he opened up classes in strip malls, in buildings. He rented rooms, put professional teachers in. He went to the homeschool community, found out what classes they would like to have, and then he adopted the look and feel of these homeschool classes that they were used to having, and he installed these classes around the district. This is really significant because a public school system, when challenged by the homeschool system, formulated an answer to that challenge, and their answer was, I'm going to do what the other guy's doing. I'm going to get another widget that looks a lot like his widget. And it was a win-win. The public school students had access to classes that they might not be able to get in the homeschool community because the public school system had teachers that taught subjects that maybe the homeschool kids didn't have access to. Higher math maybe science labs, some physical fitness programs. So the homeschool guys won because they got the public school to meet them halfway and offer them classes they couldn't get anywhere else. The public school won because then the state says, I'll give you part-time dollars for every one of those part-time students. And now what we have are two schools in Arizona that are working in collaboration with the homeschool world. The homeschool world isn't giving up its sovereignty. It isn't giving up the right of the parents to educate their child. The parent is still driving the bus there. But they get to take advantage of the resources the public school has. And the public school gets funding for each one of these part-time students. It's a win-win. That's the free market. Another really interesting case, and this one really intrigued me, this took place in Ohio. And at this school in Ohio, district superintendent came on board, and he noticed that over a couple years that the school had lost 10% of its student body to the homeschool world. That was significant. That's 200 students. And his response was to do a survey of the homeschool families, the ones that were exiting and the ones that already exited. And he asked them, why are you leaving? He didn't try to convince them to come back. He said, why are you leaving? And they told him basically two reasons: culture and content. They didn't like the culture of the schools. They didn't feel that it was right that their child should have to be afraid of bullies or gangs or drugs. And they said in some cases they didn't feel it was right that the students should have their faith denigrated by some of the teachers on staff. And this superintendent's response, in a written response, was their answers were the right ones. So what did he do? Did he try to change everything in their schools to get these homeschool kids back? No. He asked them, how can I help you? Stay homeschooled. I want to help. He said, his goal was to develop a community, an educational community in that county that would include the homeschoolers and the public schoolers. So homeschoolers told him, well, there's certain classes that we obviously have trouble getting, the upper level science classes and some of the computer things. So this district superintendent, he appointed a teacher that had used to be a principal in a Christian school and who had contacts within the homeschool community, and he asked her to put together a team. And this team developed one of the very first virtual academies, online academies. And they went out and they found content online that they could offer to their students, these homeschool students. And it began with the homeschool students taking these online classes. Then pretty soon, the public school kids started taking some of these online classes to supplement what they were getting in school. And all of a sudden, you end up with this community of students, some part-time public, some full-time public. Full-time homeschool, full-time public school coming together. Athletic events, sharing in athletic events, sharing in band and art classes, science classes. They built computer labs, and some of the homeschool kids had the option of coming to the computer lab all day and getting one-on-one tutorial type instruction along with the computer courses from a staff member that would be there, or several staff members. And what ended up happening is that they've got this model of education now in this county in Ohio, and it's kind of, the lines are blurred. It's parent-directed education, and the parents are involved. The homeschool parents are involved in the county's educational system. And one of this gentleman's goals, with superintendent's goals, was to keep the parents involved, because there were levies that have to be voted on. There are taxes and things, issues, important issues for the educational system, and he wanted these people involved. So he set up one of the most collaborative and cooperative experiments in the educational system today, and it's working phenomenally. The last report I had said that there were over 250 children enrolled in this virtual academy from his district. And they've started another academy that branches off that one, and they're making that statewide. So it works. It can work. The free market is a great example, and is a great analogy to explain why homeschooling has a place at the table of any discussion concerning education. All right. So, why should homeschool get a seat at the table? Is homeschooling a valid expression in the educational landscape? I say yes, it is. And using our market analogy that we've been discussing, I think there are two basic reasons why homeschooling has earned its place. In the marketplace, if enough people want to buy a product, it's a valid product. Well, as I stated before, we have an awful lot of people buying this product called homeschooling. We've gone from 50,000 in the 80s to maybe close to 3 million, a little bit over 3 million students, and growing. Also, one of the other aspects of the market that I believe grant homeschooling a place at the table is the fact that how its competitors are treating it. This reminds me of a boxing analogy. I can't believe I'm using an analogy within an analogy, but here goes. When I was growing up, the two primary heavyweights that were the two of the biggest rivals that the sport has ever seen was Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali was constantly dismissed as not hitting hard, and he was a pretty boxer, and he was effective, but he didn't really hit hard. Somebody made that statement to Joe Frazier, who fought 3 fights with him, losing 2 of them. And Joe Frazier, though he did not like Muhammad Ali in the slightest, told that reporter that he hits like a tank. He says, he hits hard. He said, I spent time in the hospital after every one of those 2 fights, a Thrilla in Manila, and I can't remember where the other one was. But the point is that Joe Frazier gave Muhammad Ali respect, because Muhammad Ali earned his respect in the boxing ring. Guess what? In the arena known as the educational marketplace, homeschoolers have earned the respect of the other competitors, as shown by Maricopa County and by the school district in Ohio. Homeschooling deserves a place at the table. We've earned our spot. And it is my hope that we can move on from here and get past the discussions of who's better, who's worse, or why I don't like you, why you don't like me. I want to get past that. And I really want us to get to the point of developing an educational model in the United States that will take us further and help restore our place in the world. Thank you for listening. I appreciate this opportunity to present my ideas to you, and I look forward to hearing from some of you concerning the subject. I have a feeling I'll be dealing with this again and again and again. I'm developing a real passion for this topic. Thank you. Mr. G out. Bye-bye.